And welcome back to episode 127 of the Backside Groundballs podcast. Super excited to be back here on the pod. My name is Trevor Powers, and I am joined by my co-host, Dan Galati. We have a super special guest here today, part two. One of our very, very few multi-guest appearances here. We have Matt Trate, who is currently the recruiting coordinator and associate head coach at Goldey Beacom College in Wilmington, Delaware. Matt, thank you for joining us on the podcast here.
Of course, fellas. Happy to be back. Excited to be a running back guy, a two-timer.
Yeah, two-timer. It's a pretty exclusive list. Obviously, your name's up there with the Brian Torsanis of the world, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but, we can keep this between us, wink and a nod, that I'm a little bit more excited to get you back here on a second time. We might have him on for a third time, so we might have to run it back a little bit here because we got a little bit of a Delaware kick coming over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, that'll be a good trip for you guys. It'll be nice to have you back in the Northeast for the holiday season. You guys will be coming back tanned. Everybody will be thinking I'm hanging out with you after my week-long trip to Aruba, getting some sun. But it'll be good to have you guys back home. You guys are killing it, doing really good things. It's cool to see the growth and see where it's kind of gone over the last, from just even the last time that I was on, hooking on now with TPA and doing some stuff down with some guys I know closely too at Gardner Webb and getting a tour of that facility. So it's really cool to see it branch out and be a fly on the wall to see what it's become.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a certain group of people that are going to be down in Cary in the month of February, and we'll have full intentions of getting you in person and doing something fun there. But obviously, super excited for what we have and super excited for our conversation today. If you haven't listened to our first episode with Coach Trate, head back to probably a couple months ago, I would say. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but we talked a lot about culture, right, and culture at Goldey Beacom and a lot of things like that. That's super important. And today we wanted to dive a little bit more into the player development side. Coach Trate's one of the best in the business with those things, and obviously somebody that Dan and I were both lucky to work with and learn from. So definitely want to dive in the weeds there. But first, how was the fall and how are things going in Lightning Land?
Everything's going pretty good. We got through the fall pretty healthy. It was an interesting fall for us. We had, from the player development side and just offensively specifically, we had the most hitters that we've had since I've been there. So this is year 8. This is the largest group of hitters that we had. So going in kind of into the summer, and when we talked before, like I know I was kind of ravaging my brain of how I was going to go through this fall, how I was going to give the guys individually what they needed while still, preparing our team offensive philosophy for the spring, where we try to make another push for a national title. But it was good. It was a fun challenge. I think that, much like the culture piece, the offensive side of it, the great thing about it is each year is just so different. Even if you have little turnover in your roster, which we did, we only graduated 3. We did bring in a decent amount of guys, but we'd only graduated 3 and two offensive players off last year's regional team. But to have new guys in the fold, even if you have the same core group, they're different, right? Because they're at a different point in their life. You get to see what they kind of worked on in the summer. Some of them went away to play. Some of them stayed home, trained, worked on their body a little bit more. So it is a little bit different each fall. But this was an exciting challenge and it was fun. I think we came out, I came out the fall feeling like we were ready to play, which is different than I felt before, because I don't know that was the focus before. I felt like we did a little bit less on the individual development side this fall, which is kind of different how I've always done it in the past. And we focused more on team offensive concepts and really implementing what we want to be from our offensive identity. So I felt like once we were done, late October, early November, if we had to play a meaningful game that next week, we were ready to go compete at a high level. And now we're fortunate as we head into the winter that I feel like, and you guys know because you've coached with us, but with the weather we get and our facility set up, I'm going to get a lot of that individual time that maybe I put towards in the fall. Traditionally, I'm going to get that in the spring. So I have a lot better idea of each individual guy's movement profile, kind of what makes each guy tick from a mental side. So I'm hoping that kind of took maybe a couple steps back on the individual side in the fall. That's going to help us take a couple steps forward, with what they worked on in the winter and when we come back for the spring season, which is still considered winter, January 15th when we start. But no, I'm excited. It was good.
I know you and I, since we speak frequently, luckily for me, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but can you just kind of go into what made you make that flip? Was it just because of the sheer number of 26 and it was like, you have a lot of new guys, so you need to learn them a little bit before you start, giving them individual plans because it's hard to meet someone and 2 weeks later say, here, this is what you need to work on. Or was it just like a staff-wide decision that maybe this will help us get off to a quicker start? What made you go more team concept this fall?
I think a couple things. So first, the way that we structured the fall was a little bit different, where we front loaded games. So we're fortunate at our level, we're allowed to play 3 outside competitions in the fall that don't count against us in the spring. So traditionally, what we would do is we would go indies right off the start, kind of on ramp guys. We do that for a month, and we would get in the team. This year, we only did like 2 weeks of indies and then got right in the team. So I felt like I wanted to put more focus on the team concepts because we started team practice in that first Saturday. So we started team practice on a Monday, and that first Saturday we played. So I didn't want to dive into too much. And then I think definitely the numbers played a role in it. And then just how we laid it out. Like I said, traditionally what I would do, I'm not a big bring somebody in and watch them hit and after 2 days be like, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. It's funny, a lot of our older guys, or I'll even tell some of the younger guys when they come in, it's like, hey, if I'm not talking to you, the first week or 2 that you're here, it's not because I don't like you and it's not because I don't want to help you, but I'm also going to just evaluate. I want to kind of see where you're at and see what you bring to the table before I start saying, hey, man, like that's great, but I just saw you take a round to BP. You need to change this and change that. And it's just like, well, now the trust is already broken, I feel like. And I don't really have much of a sample size off of what they need to do. And then on top of that, like what environment am I watching them in? Am I watching them in a flip environment that's like not challenging at all? T environment, same thing. Or like, are we, baptism by fire off the hack attack? Are they seeing live arms? Like, what are we making the adjustments off of? So I've always been, I shouldn't say always, but as I've progressed in my career, I've become more of a stand back and evaluate before I speak, especially to the hitters, because I do know how hard it is. And I think a lot of the older guys now that we've had that have been with me for a while really respect that. But the young guys, when they come in, they're like, this guy's not even saying anything. And they're like, that's good. Like, trust me, that's good. Like, he wants to see you fail forward. Like, and then when you have issues, go to him. And once you go to him, he's hands on and he's going to dive in and roll up the sleeves and get in there with you. But I'm also not going to just badger somebody, and try to change things if they don't feel like they need to change anything at the time, because they're not going to be invested in it.
Yeah, and buy-in is so important when you have to make a change for a guy that sometimes you almost want to, like, not want to see them struggle, but it's almost better to see them struggle, especially for those young guys that have probably hit 450 their whole life every weekend. That moment when they do start to struggle, they kind of actually are searching for that advice. And it's like, hey, yeah, this game speeds up a little bit and we can kind of make some adjustments there. But, I want to kind of circle back to the team concepts a little bit there and just talk about kind of the open-mindedness to change. Obviously, you've had success in the past. Your teams have had success in the past doing things a certain way. Kind of how have you continued to adapt and grow? I think that's something that I've noticed as an outsider who's just followed Goldey Beacom baseball at every step of the way is super impressive, because I know we've talked about it. The team last year stole a lot more bases and didn't hit as many home runs as I'm sure you would have liked, or as it had in the past. But just being able to adapt and change and manipulate what you're trying to do and be that chameleon of an offensive coach, offensive coordinator, however you want to describe it, of like knowing what's going to work for those guys. What has gone into that over the years?
I think that's a really good question. And I think a lot of it has come down to recruiting. So when you're starting a program from scratch, everything has its challenges, whether you're starting a program from scratch or you're at a program with a rich history, or so it's not a woe is us or woe is anybody else. Everybody has their challenges. So you have to figure out what your challenges are. And I think early on our challenges were, we could get good baseball players that had some ability offensively to hit, but maybe weren't that high end of an athlete, and it's not to slight those guys, but it was really hard to convince guys to come in and say, hey, here's a program with no tradition. We have nothing, and we're going to win while we're here, and I promise you, and we're going to do this, because kids, when you're recruiting, want to go somewhere where they're going to have a chance to win right away and to get drafted and play for conference championships and national titles. So I think that there's a chain of command, some steps that you have to take to get there. So early on, our offensive philosophy, and a lot of this is probably who I was as a player and just as a young hitting coach, where I just wanted to slug teams to death, and we lived and died by the 3-run home run. And I think that we took that as far as we could. I thought we had some high on base years. I thought we could really hit. We would punch out a good amount of times though, but we would leave the yard. And even the years that you guys were with us, we made our first regional run. Like, that team was built around power, guys that could leave the yard. And I think that the longer that I'm in it and I coach in the area that I coach, it's like, well, there's a lot of things that are outside of our control that factor into that. So for instance, like the first 2 years, we were a wood bat conference. So we probably should have been a little bit more of the offense we were last year in year 7, but we didn't have those type of horses to run that race. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why try to set up our team to steal a bunch of bases when we had a bunch of guys that, we only had a couple guys that ran sub 6. Yeah. Or sub 7, sorry. So we didn't have sub 6. I'll take some sub 6. We only had a couple guys that ran sub 7. So it's like, we had to really drive the baseball, but drive the baseball with wood bats in, 40-degree weather, not ideal. You're playing a lot of 1-0, 2-1 games, but we did have some guys with some juice. So we still left the yard with wood bats. So that kind of philosophy played for us early in our time there. But as we got into it and we're starting to play deeper in the postseason, we're playing more meaningful games. It's like, those years weren't a failure because the journey is the reward, right? And it really is. But like, our ultimate goal is to win it. Like, we want to win a national title. We want to compete on a national level. So to some extent, we fell short of that. So it wasn't successful. So you go back to the drawing board and you look at it, and it's like, okay, well, the first year we went to the regional, we played a lot of tight games. Kudos to Dan and Coach Cockle put together a great plan and kept us in games. And we were playing a lot of tight ball games, but we were facing some really good arms, and we went 2-2 in that regional. And it's like, the one night we won a game late night, we hit a 2-run bomb in the first, mm-hmm. and we kind of rode that the whole game. We didn't have anything else to show for it. We were, live and die by the 3-run home run and punched a lot. So after that year, I kind of looked at it. I'm like, well, there's got to be a different way. I don't really want to forgo the power, but I want to be able to win. I want us to be able to win games offensively in a multitude of ways, because some things that we can't control are the arm that we're facing. You're going to face everybody's number 1's really good. Everybody's number 2's, pretty much really good. Where we can get fat, I feel like offensively, is when we play 5-6 game weeks. I really feel like our 5 and 6 on the mound is like somebody else's 1, 2, or 3, and then our offense can get fat. But if we're facing a good arm, we can't control that. Our park really plays to drive the ball out to left, but if the wind's blowing in from left, like, those balls get caught. So we have to find different ways to score runs. So the philosophy kind of shifted from, hey, let's get on base and let's slug, to let's find as many ways to win and hedge our bets and be, death by 1,000 cuts, and be able score more runs. Do I care how they're scored anymore? No. Home runs are fun. I mean, we have our bomb book, and that's like one of the best things the kids designed when we were there. And it's like when they come in, the no fun NCAA said no more celebrating on the field with anything and took that away. Virginia Tech sledgehammer and all that. So now we have a bomb book. So we have a Polaroid camera in the dugout. When somebody hits a home run, if you hit a home run with guys on base, you take the picture with the guys on base and it gets plastered in the book, and the dugout goes nuts. And it's a book that we have, we'll have for the eternity of the program, which is really cool. But I like scoring runs like that, just like I like scoring runs with a guy on first. We hit a ball in the gap, or driving a guy in with a routine ground ball with a runner on third and executing in those situations. I don't care as much as I want to score more runs. And when I started to look at like what we do offensively from a standpoint of like what our record is when we score 6, 7, 8 runs a game, it's like crazy. Like if we can get to that 7, 8 run threshold,
yep,
that's huge. And I think that if the more times that you put pressure on teams, the more apt you are to score runs. And I think the more times that you put pressure on pitchers, the more apt they are to leave pitches up in the zone. And I think you can still get those 3-run bombs. They might just come at different points in the game. But so that's kind of changed, and as we've won, the recruiting model has changed. So now we do have a lot of guys, that can run. Like last year, our catcher stole 47 bases. He ran a 6.5. Like our center fielder ran a 6.3. So Meach in left runs a 6.5, and I think he was 26 of 26 stealing bases last year, and also had a couple pumps. And the catcher that stole 47 bags had 10 home runs and I think 15 doubles. So like he had a great year. So like our recruiting models changed where we're getting a little bit more well-rounded athlete versus the guy that just is a couple trick pony where it's like he can get on base, he's got really good plate discipline, he can drive the ball. But now we have some of those guys that maybe don't have as much thump, even though, Chich, who runs a 6.3, still hit 3 home runs last year. Like I'll take that as a leadoff guy. So that has kind of changed our offensive philosophy.
Yeah, and you stole my thunder of my next question because I wanted to go into just being multiple, right? And the example you used of the regional where we were all together up at Franklin Pierce, we show up there day one, we have practice, on-field BP. It's a laser show. It's warm waters, the wind's blowing off the lake, everything's good and dandy, and then for whatever reason, a cold front comes in, the wind turns, and it's just blowing in. And I remember sitting in the dugout, and I believe it was the Lemoyne game, where we hit a lot of balls in the air. The first one, if I'm not mistaken, I saw Dan.
Stack? Malloy?
I think it was
Sorry.
Malloy. Malloy, yeah. And it was a lot of balls in the air that kind of held up for flyouts, right? And balls that were like punished, right? Like not like hit soft. And it's just like being able to build that multiple offense of like, okay, like we realized early that like this whole homer thing is not working. And we're facing really good pitchers, and where we have to scratch and claw for, a flare single to win a game 1-0, because we're facing the East Region Pitcher of the Year and things like that. Like those come up in regional scenarios where you have to have multiple different ways to win. So I kind of want to transition, because you touched on all the points of being multiple and the importance of just scoring runs, not how you score runs, of the mindset of that. What kind of offensive identity are you trying to bring now that it might not be directly, challenge the fence, challenge the pole, hit some homers? Is it aggressiveness and aggressiveness in every way? I mean, the fact that you're mentioning guys stealing 47 bases, guys stealing 26 bases, kind of like just off the cuff, like it's not a big deal. Like that's a huge deal, while also having guys that can challenge the fence. Is that kind of like starting to build that identity? Like if you could build your perfect offense, is it around that aggressiveness of we're going to take second base when we can with the steal, but we're also not going to complain when that same guy that can steal 26 bags can also challenge double-digit home runs?
Yeah, I think that it's chess, not checkers, right? We want to leverage our situation every chance we can offensively to set us up for the best chance of success. So, offensively from a swing perspective, we talk about maximizing our miss hits, where I want we don't sack bunt much. I don't hate it, because I do think that there's a place for it in the game. Um, our offensive philosophy, I don't want to use it that much, unless we have to. But I do want to base hit bunt. My ideal lineup is 1 through 9. Everybody can base hit bunt, and everybody can leave the yard. I think that even if you show teams that you're going to base hit bunt, all of a sudden that brings the third baseman in. What does that leave behind him in the 5-5 hole? Space. Maximize our miss hits. You get out in front of a breaking ball. All of a sudden that was a ground ball to the third baseman. If you never show that, like that year that you're built on the 3-run home run, all of a sudden your big guy gets out in front on a breaking ball. He doesn't have the ability to base hit bunt. That's a routine ground out, or that's a double play. All of a sudden it's like, there's just so much you have to prepare for defensively that you're like, okay, well, this guy has to play even or in front. So now I've created space behind. It's like, well, they're going to run. So we got to, first and second or guy second, we got to really focus on holding at second. Well, all of a sudden that opens up more space in the infield. Now we've maximized our miss hits. The outfield has to be, when they play us, has to be really cognizant of like, who's on base? What are they going to try to do? Like, I like to think, I haven't played us and I don't talk to enough people probably that do play us, but I would like to think that after you play one of our offenses right now, you are mentally exhausted because you're just like, what are they going to do? Like, you constantly have to be aware. So you're making guys on the mound uncomfortable because we're going to run. So it's like, okay, if you're going to be really good at holding, we're not going to just run into outs. That's fine. But maybe your pitchers aren't comfortable slide stepping. Now they're uncomfortable. It's like maybe your middle infielders aren't, maybe they don't have enough range that if they hold, they can get to a certain spot. So I think that leverages our situation a little bit. But overall, like, yeah, we want to be super aggressive. It's a little bit of a football mentality, turning the defensive side into the offensive piece where it's like pressure burst pipes. I want to be constant pressure from first pitch to last pitch is what I want to be. Now, I think that you can't just be willy-nilly in that. I think that that's something that needs to be taught. I think that that's something that's communicated on a daily basis. It's more calculated pressure than it is anything else. We want to have safety in our pocket. We want to have suicide squeeze in our pocket. We want to have first and third offense in our pocket. And it takes a lot of time to install all that. And I think the tricky way to do it is to find a way to install all those things that you might think are important to you, but do it in a setting that guys are engaged, where it's not, like the guys at Gardner Webb talked about it a little bit, where it's like, hey, we're going to do bunt coverages. It's like nobody wants to stand there and do bunt coverages. We don't want to stand there and run through first and thirds or do this or do that. But we found a way to gamify it a little bit. And it's like we do a little bit a lot and kind of chunk it. And that's where, going back to the original question of how did we develop offensively this fall, it's like we did it through game settings a lot more, whether it was like a coach pitch or an inter squad or hack attack scrimmage or like against somebody else. We tried to do a lot of different things and kind of went baptism by fire and installing some of this. That way we feel like when, we get to the spring, we can kind of touch on things, slow it down if we have to, but hit the ground running.
I just want to go back.
Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. Before I get into my question, I just want to go back a couple answers ago when you mentioned the program record when you score like 8+ runs, and I would just like to apologize for one of the losses on there. It was probably it was on me. I think we all know which one I'm talking about.
That's not your fault. We all play a part in it. We probably could have scored more runs that day.
We put up. I felt like we put up enough.
It happens. It's ebbs and flows, right? But I mean, it's a good point because, like, not that. Like, I know you're like making a joke, but like, it is a good point. Like, how much more enjoyable is it for you as a pitching coach, or how much more comfortable does your pitching staff feel? Where it's like, all right, these guys are going to go out and score. Like, you never feel like you're out of a game instead of being out there and having to. I can't give up. It's a lot easier to pitch, I would assume. I don't pitch, but I would assume it's a lot easier to pitch feeling like I need to keep it close versus I can't give up a run. I
Well,
need
and
to keep us in it.
it's the same, just looking at it from the other way going around too, right? It's a lot easier to hit when you're not constantly feeling like you're chasing 4 runs in the first inning, right? So like that's what makes baseball a team game when it's really,
Yeah.
it's an individual in a lot of ways, but that's really what makes it a team game. Is like if you can, if both sides of the ball have faith in each other, and it's even just like how much easier it is to pitch when you got a good defense behind you because you're not trying to generate a swing and miss on every single pitch. So I
Right.
think it kind of goes together. Talk a little bit. I try not to ever tell someone to talk a little bit about it because it's open ended. But how do you create that buy-in when you're developing? When you're changing the offense a little bit and you're trying to create, that dynamic offense of we're gonna take the extra base and we're gonna be able to base hit bunt because. I mean, I sat in the dugout with you for 5 years of you telling guys like, why aren't we trying to base hit bunts? But I remember we'd be facing an arm who was good and was kind of, we were just going up there and taking our at bats and we weren't trying to force the issue. How do you create that buy-in? Is it all just by doing the game-like stuff? Because I can even imagine, some days where guys are just going through the motions even when you have the game-like stuff. So where does creating that buy-in come from? Is it just constantly, reaffirming them every day?
I think it's reaffirming them every day. I think it's creating a reward system. Something we started to do last year was just simply chart barrels anytime we hit on the field. And simple pass fail. Like if you're on the barrel, you're 1 for 1, and then your next ball, if you're not on the barrel, you're 1 for 2. So from a swing perspective, I think charting barrels has been huge because it incentivizes it, and it's like we have a weekly winner where whoever wins the barrels for the week gets like a T-shirt or what, like a winter hat or like the extra gear that all college programs have floating around. It's just like it's a way for guys to compete, and it puts emphasis on something that they can control a little bit because now we're talking about like now without telling them the importance of making positive swing decisions, which we talk about, but like instead of just like beating that into them, it's like it's showing them the importance of making positive swing decisions. Now we're controlling the zone. Guys are understanding their own ability. Like, hey, here's pitches that I hammer. Here's pitches that I don't. Like you'll see our guys take a lot in BP, take strikes sometimes, unless we're like not most times we're in an 0-0 count when we're taking BP. Not all the time. But so like we'll chart that. That's been helpful to get our identity because when you're charting barrels, right, you're not focused on. It's still outcome driven, but it's not, right? Because you're talking about were you on the barrel or were you not? Because like that doesn't. I didn't ask you if you got a hit. I didn't ask you what the ball flight did. I didn't ask you anything of that. Like just keep the main thing, right? Let's be on the barrel. How many times can we be on the barrel? From the base hit bunt standpoint and doing the other things, I think it comes down to giving them creative freedom. And especially in the fall, understanding that like success and defining success for them is huge. Success is an attempt, not the outcome. Right. Success isn't I executed the base hit bunt. Success is being willing to pull it out. Success is pushing the envelope and trying to steal second where maybe you weren't sure if you had it in the fall setting. Okay, you made it. Okay, you didn't. Like it doesn't really matter. Loosening the reins a little bit, which I think, for most people, I would say is probably hard to do because it's uncomfortable, right? Because now you're putting, your livelihood, in a kid's hands. But, that's why, like, we don't give the steal much. We green light. Or we, if the math doesn't add up or we see something that we don't, then we tell them they're red. But we want those guys to have freedom. Because if I have to tell somebody to execute something, like that, like a stolen base, it's a lot harder. They're a tick later. And if it's going to be bang, bang, they're a tick later, they're out. So I think taking the reins off of them and again, defining what success looks like to them, what I think success is, which is being comfortable trying it, creative freedom, especially in the fall where it's like fail. Like push the envelope. Like you guys have seen when we do Bolt BP and we talk Bolt BP enough. Like Bolt BP is huge for us when we talk about like our base running stuff. Like our guys push the envelope and go first to third on balls that they would never try to go first to third on in the season if they didn't do it in practice. there's like so many times you'll see it when we play in carry. Somebody will hit a sack fly to center with a runner on second, and I'm standing at third with my arm up, and the guy tags and he beats it. Because I don't think that he can beat it, but he's done it a million times in practice, even though I've seen it. So like more times than not, like the only thing that I control at third is whether I'm sending the guy, on a ball behind him to score. But like balls, if you're a runner at first base and the ball's hit to left, I just stand there. I don't say anything. That's their read. I've allowed them to take ownership. And then, you know what? When they get thrown out, I don't jump down their throat.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I talk to them and, hey, what did you see? What made, like they're frustrated because they're embarrassed because they got thrown out. So like some guys you can go right over to them. Some guys you got to let chill for a second, but then you have a conversation with them and it's like, hey, okay, like you got tossed. Like, was that ideal? No, obviously we want to be safe. But what did you see? Well, I saw this and I thought this. Okay, well, here's what I saw. I thought your route was a little bit wide. You can cut the bag a little bit better at second and then you probably beat it. Now it turns into a conversation and it's not like now when he goes to do that again, he's going to have success more than likely versus I've pulled the reins back on him and now he's afraid to make a mistake. So I think that that's something that we've done a really good job of over the last couple of years where it's like, let your athlete's athlete, man. And it's not like laissez-faire where we're not coaching them up. I know sometimes it sounds like that, but, like I think that there's power in that. There's power in conviction.
I'm gonna tell you this. This has never happened in our interview settings where you've stolen my question twice.
Nice,
gotten there. So I guess that I guess me and you just.
I'm running this podcast, Trevor.
Seriously, I guess that just.
We're going to interview you.
Right. I guess that explains why we're probably usually on the same page more times than not when we talk and have conversations. But I was going to ask about the next step of like, okay, kid runs in a situation where he shouldn't have run in, and it's very obvious from a detached coach's standpoint, and we see it so many times. Like every coach wants to talk about, hey, we want our offense to steal X amount of bags and we want to be safe at an 80% clip, and then a kid runs in an 0-0 count with the 3-hitter up and 2 outs and whatever situation you're in and gets thrown out and the coach jumps him. And then they're like, I wonder why that kid never runs again, right? Never has the confidence to run. It's just like talking about the mental aspect, and I guess tie this into hitting as well. Of like hitting is so mental, the offensive game is so mental, and so much of it comes down to confidence. Where it's like, these kids are 18 to 22 years old. They're not fully developed as human beings in the brain capacity that. Being able to empower them to make mistakes and know that you're not breathing down their neck to, just absolutely rip into them. The example I always use is runner on third, less than 2 outs, tight game, guy punches out. He knows, everybody in the ballpark knows, the one thing he couldn't do was strike out. And how many times do we see coaches that absolutely rip that kid to shreds when he gets back into the dugout and basically embarrass him in front of his teammates and in front of his peers when he knows for certain that he knows more than you that he made a mistake. Kind of talk about that mental side of hitting, of empowering confidence and understanding when the right time to criticize or get on a guy and the right time to educate a guy.
Yeah, that's really good because I think that is so much of the battle, probably closer to 90%, 95% of the battle when you're talking about dealing with hitters and just human beings and understanding what that looks like. I mean, first things first, I think that, we all want to win. We all want to compete. Our guys know that, they know I want to win just as much as them. I'm in the trenches with them, and this has changed over my career. And a lot of it, I had a guy that I played for that was great and kind of taught me some of this. But I only got to play for one guy that was like this. And then, when I got to Goldey, I can remember it would happen where it's like, second and third, 1 out. And it's like guy punches. I'm like, that can't happen. And one time Skip was like, well, it can because you just watched it happen. And it's like, and it's funny. And it's like, I was really mad in the moment. And I'm like, but he's right. And then I think being around, people like you two that are so like level, the year I got to work with you on the offensive side was like huge for my development. Just as a player or as a person and a coach. And then like having Bill and Kevin on staff now, that it's like, guys can talk through situations in the dugout, or I can look at you and like we're on the same page with different things. But hitting is hard. Um, you know, so much of it comes down to what's going on between their ears. So that's something that we do work on, and we'll work on more. We didn't work on as much this fall, but something that we'll work on a lot this spring and the winter before we get playing is the mental side of it. Because like you do jump down that kid's throat, and then it's like, okay, well, what's the percentage he has success when he gets that same opportunity in 2 innings or in 2 games or in 2 weeks? He's going to go right back to that. So I think, letting guys know that it's okay, that it's okay. It's not, you don't have to settle for it, but it's okay. Don't settle for the fact that you struck out or that you failed, however you want to deem it, or, you made a mistake on the bases or whatever, but like, let's learn from it and let's move forward together. And I think those conversations are important. And once guys get past that, like, especially with the younger guys, once they get past like the embarrassment stage of it, because that's usually what they've come up in, where they've just been, all right, well, now he's going to jump down my throat, or this is embarrassing. Like, I just let my team down. And it's like, well, did you though? Because like the guy before you probably had a chance to drive him in and maybe he didn't, or the guy after you or what, like there's so much that goes into it, and just trying to stay focused on what you can control. And I think that one thing that's helped us mentally, is they know how much I love them, and they know that I'm not going to kill them when they make a mistake. I'm far enough removed from a player, and I wasn't very good, but I remember how hard it is to hit and the daily grind of the process of hitting. So I think having those conversations with them leading up to it, I think is important. Watching guys fail forward, having guys in your program that have struggled, and younger guys are able to turn to them and be like, we had a guy in our program that I can remember talking off the ledge as a freshman, and he's got a chance to probably be, he'll probably be an all-conference player this year and has the tools to be the conference player of the year this year. And as a freshman, he was talking about maybe never wanting to play baseball again because he just didn't think he belonged and he was getting beat up a lot. Like, guys being able to lean on those guys and talk about their experiences going through it is huge. And then just from a swing perspective, a couple things that I'm proud that we've done is like, something as simple as positive self-talk and making those guys write 3 things down that they're telling themselves when they go to the plate to clear their mind. We work on our walk to the plate. We work on how we enter the box. We work on how to control our breath and get to a focal point on our bat or something on our helmet or a batting glove to kind of control our breath, and then talk about the 3 things that we're going to tell ourselves. And it's individualized. It's different for everybody, but it's always positive, because I think positive thoughts breed positive results. And then another thing that I think that we've done a good job of is they all have like a little highlight reel of their good swings. I think video for me is so important. And bad video is important too, to see. You want to see, what's going wrong, but I think it's super important that guys before games, look at video of when they're going really good, to put that in their mind. Here's some, and it could be swings from earlier in the year. It could be swings from earlier in the week, but just to have that like in front of them, I think really helps their mental game. So I think that that's helped kind of lend our guys to that creative freedom and be able to take the reins off, because we do work the mental game so much offensively, and they do know that I understand it's hard, and I'm not going to jump down their throat. And I think you got to know your guys too. I think there's a couple guys that we had last year that it was somewhere of a hybrid with that, where it's like I needed to jump down their throat. But I think that, and I'm not saying you have to be kumbaya and you got to light candles in the dugout and you got to hug up on everybody all the time, because it doesn't have to be that. But the message isn't as important as how it's delivered. Jumping up and down in the third base box, yelling at somebody isn't going to help that kid. It's only going to put him deeper in a hole. That doesn't mean that I can't take him take him into the dugout and firmly ask him, what are you doing? He might need that, like he might need that. That might be how he reacts. Because I've had like a guy last year that I'm thinking of. It's like, hey man, it's all right. Like, I understand what you saw. Like, it's tough. And he's like, it's not, it's not all right. It's not, like everybody's had that kid. And it's like, okay, well, you need to find something to snap him out of it, because now he needs to go play defense. So maybe it is getting a little bit more, vocal with him, but not in front of everybody, not in front of his team. Like, so you have to know your guys, know your personnel.
That's a really good point, because everybody is different. Everybody responds differently. But I'm going to kind of veer off here a little bit, because I think that, just my knowledge of from working with you is when I first got to join the program, I knew nothing about numbers and data, and obviously it's taken over baseball, and I learned a lot of it from you and Skipper up there. Why are people I'm going to ask you this and see where you go with it. Why are people in baseball so afraid of data and numbers? And what is your opinion on the people who sit there and constantly on social media want to bash, looking at numbers that can, in my opinion, only help?
It's a good question. I've never really thought of it, but as you ask it, I actually think the answer is easier than what we think it is. I think we need to dumb it down even more. I think people want something concrete one way or the other. I don't think people really want to live in the gray area of anything. They want this or they want that. And it's like, I just don't think that's how life works. Like, even from a swing standpoint, like from an offensive development standpoint, like there's guys that I don't necessarily like or believe in what they teach, but I'm not so dismissive of it, because I do think that I can take something from it and help one guy, and I think it's the same when you're talking about like the numbers. Like, the numbers aren't for everybody. I could give, from a player perspective, like you could have a Rapsodo or something in front of the player, and he's going to eat that up. And then player B, that's going to completely blow his mind, and it's going to send him into a tailspin. So it comes back to knowing your personnel when you're giving those guys that kind of data and that kind of information. But just from like an overall, like, broad perspective, baseball, baseball community, which I think is what you're asking, why. I just think people want it so concrete. They want this or that. Don't tell me about the numbers. Just show me the play on the field. And it's like, well, there's just so much that goes into it. Our game is so complex and there's so many things that are out of our control. Like you can look at, like, that's why, like I mentioned earlier about charting barrels, why I think that's so important for us. It's like, from the offensive side, oh man, like, pick anybody, but Adolis Garcia stinks right now. He starts the season 0 for 8. It's like, okay, well, he's 0 for 8 and hits 6 balls over 100 miles an hour. And somebody's gonna be like, well, I just see that he's making outs. It's like, okay, yeah, but he's right there. He's hit 6 balls 100 miles an hour. So I think there is a mesh point, but nobody wants all that in their head, because it's just more that you have to be open to. And I think people are afraid to be open to different things. People, kind of what we talked about before the show started, like, people want to be comfortable, right? You want to know what you know. You want to know what you know. But I just think there's so much out there to learn. And that, to me, that's the exciting part about the game, is as old as it is and as traditional as the game is, like, and where it's going. I think it's in a great place right now. It's the college and professional is more athletic than it's ever been before. The special athletes that are playing this game, but there's more information out there than there ever has been before too. And I think there's beauty in that, because at the bottom line of it, like, it's still score more runs than the other team, and doing things like you see when it matters most, like doing things situationally in the postseason, whether you're talking college baseball or the MLB season, right, it still matters. I know I'm kind of going off on something else there, but I think that's why. I just think people want it this way or that way. They don't want to be open to different things, because you can go down. It's like, you can go down a rabbit hole. It's like a tree. I
Right.
had to give a presentation a couple weeks ago, a hitting presentation. It's like, so there's so many branches of the tree, but there's also the root system underneath. You can go so many different ways.
Right.
So it's like, how deep do you want to go? And I think people just don't like that gray area. Freaks people out.
I'm glad you bring that up because that's the kind of where I wanted to go next. How do you, as you sit there and does it depend, I guess, year to year and what lineup you have on what numbers you're kind of more focused on? Obviously, you've talked a lot about barrel percentage today, and that matters because typically when you find a barrel, good things happen. Are you, what kind of stuff, because I can think back to, I don't remember what year it was. We all had every guy in the lineup had a blast on their knob. Now a lot of people it didn't last long because people didn't appreciate us doing that. But like, how do you kind of sift through what information you think is best, and has it gotten to the point now where it's so individualized on each guy on hey, this for you, I just want you to focus on this. For you, I want you to focus on this. Because at the end of the day, to the point you made about Adolis Garcia, if a guy's, starts the season 0 for 13, but 6 of those balls come off the bat 95 plus, like, he's probably going to stay in the lineup, and guys behind him need to understand that he's going to stay in the lineup.
Right. Water finds its level, right, Dan?
Yes, always.
I think it's become more individualized, and it's in the recent years, it's been more approach based and more conversation based and more minor swing adjustments. I mean, we've been fortunate. We haven't really brought guys in the last couple of years that it's like, hey, we've had to overhaul this, that, or the other. Like last year, Johnny, who had a great year, the minor adjustment that we made, and when I say we, I mean me, him, the coaching staff. Like, it's never the coaching staff; it's the player is at the forefront of making any type of change. Because one, they have to want to do it. Two, it has to be something they're comfortable with. And, three, there has to be a need for a change. But like the minor change that we made with him was just like his initial setup. And like it kind of helped him. It just put him in a better position to hit at foot strike. And, he kind of took off from that. Now, I could have, if we had blast on him, it would have told me this, that, or the other. But I just don't think, he needed numbers. He needed feels. And a lot of the guys, I think now, because numbers are so prevalent in our game, and they are around, and kids grow up with them and understand it a little bit more, or I guess understand it even sometimes a little bit less, even though they have more information out there. I still think it's good for the coach to understand what the numbers are showing and what it means, but I don't know how much the players need it. Need access to it. I think that you can show them, and you can use it as a way to drive something home a little bit more. But, and it's not to knock blast, because I think it was great while we had it, and I still use it for some things. And I learned so much when the whole team had it. But so much of it is in video and approach and feel, that I think it has become more just individual conversations and individualized. We have our base, like what we want to do offensively. It's like our guys know we want to hit 100 doubles and steal 100 bases. And if you have the right team, sometimes you don't hit 100 doubles because you hit more home, those doubles turn into home runs. But that's kind of our basis. I don't want to give them too much. I just think it's hard enough that they're sitting there looking at numbers, and they're like, what I found with Blast, and somebody asked me about it the other day, actually. And, I think it was a good tool, but and I always go back to our good friend, Brian McCourt. It's like he was chasing numbers on his Blast because his numbers were skewed. And it's like, when the more information I learned about it, about the tool itself, it's like, well, Brian McCourt barrel tips. So as soon as he started to tip his barrel, it would trigger the sensor to give you to cue it up for a certain metric, and he would never get there because it would say he was completely disconnected, or it would alter his numbers. So he was constantly trying to chase numbers, and really he was putting himself in bad positions to hit. We figured that out pretty quick, and then we were able to make that adjustment. We're like, don't worry about the numbers.
Yeah, and one of the things that I find fascinating too when we talk about the numbers as well is, we're lucky enough and we work with a lot of hitters that have a HitTrax, right? And it's immediate feedback, but guys get into bad habits chasing numbers on HitTrax, right? Like topspin is a thing that I don't think HitTrax registers as much as you'd think it should, for a machine that's as expensive and impressive to be able to build something that does that. But you see kids that, again, I think the best way I saw it was like bat speed matters, but also while having good direction and having good barrel awareness, right? Bat speed doesn't matter if you can, it's golf, right? People think, oh, the golf swing. It's like, yeah, well, club head speed matters on the PGA Tour when those guys have been playing for 25 plus years since they were 2 years old when they picked up a golf club. Dan and I could go out there and rip 180 club head speed, and the ball's going to end up on hole 9 when we're teeing off on 1, right? It's going to side spin. And there's a thing in baseball that's similar. And again, we're lucky enough to have those resources and work with guys in a bat speed sense, but trying to get guys like, okay, hey, we're chasing a number because we're trying to build an engine and we're trying to develop bat speed and we're trying to develop as a hitter. And then you just watch this kid go all out of whack in his front shoulder. He's disconnected. He's flying open. He has no brakes because it's just all about bat speed. And he looks up at the HitTrax and it says he hit that ball 97 and he's fired up about it. And you're like, dude, have fun trying to hit a breaking ball when you're on time for a heater, because that's not repeatable. How do you balance that of being able to get guys where you want them to have the feedback and you want them to be like, hey, I hit that ball 110. We've seen guys that are able to do that, but not get infatuated with that number itself because it has a slight correlation for doing it off of a flip or off of a BP arm to in-game success, right? Those guys that can hit those numbers in-game off repeatable, off of game velocity, those are the guys that have a lot of success because exit velocity does matter. But how do you balance that ability to not get guys to create bad habits using the chasing a number or chasing a barrel or chasing anything like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because there's only so much time in a day, right? And there's so many different things that work together in the swing, and you touched on a couple of them when you're talking about, is bat speed important? Yes, I think bat speed's important, but I also think your brakes are important. I think that your direction's important. I think that your vision's important, and I'm not putting these in any type of order. I think how you use the ground is important. So it's like, I think you want to figure out what is the lowest hanging fruit for each individual guy, I think is the best way to attack it. And I think it comes back to what I talked about before, where it's like, hey, guys come in and you're working with a guy for the first time and you guys have started to do lessons and stuff. But, the little bit of lesson work that I've done, it's like when I'm working with a kid for the first time that maybe isn't in our program, I sit back and watch him the first like 30 minutes. Like I'll feed him balls and whatever, but like I just want to see before I start to make adjustments. Same thing with your college guys. I think you want to try to figure out what's the lowest hanging fruit. Do guys need bat speeds? Maybe guys have enough bat speed and they just have poor direction and they don't have good brakes. They don't use their body efficiently. Maybe they have poor vision. So I think when we're training our guys, my overall focus is I'm going to reverse engineer it. I want, how are guys going to compete off an arm and in game, because that's the ultimate. And then what do we need to work on to get them to that point? So I try to give them, we're more of a smorgasbord than we are this is our focus. And I think that by doing that, it helps guys map out their own individual plan, whether that's by themselves or with myself included. So during a typical practice setting, we'll have some bat speed stuff going. We'll have some direction and path stuff going. We'll have some brake stuff going. We'll have some vision training going with like Batea, and some different things. And I try to give them all of that in a practice setting. That way they become the best well-rounded version of themselves as they can be. And then if there's something that they're really deficient in, sit down with them and try to talk about mapping out a plan to, hey, here's some things that we can do to build bigger bat speed. We're going to use the super speed sluggers. And then once we feel like we get to this benchmark, we're going to dial back on that. Now we're really going to build up your brakes because now we've increased your engine, but now we need to work on your brakes. So I think that that's something that we do. It's probably different than what I did when I first started, because it was, like a lot more just like underload, overload stuff. and getting guys going with different swing implements. But and we still do a lot of that. But I try to throw a lot at them because I think that they can handle a lot. The body can handle a lot, and it helps them self-organize by putting a lot on them.
So tell me this, how have you adapted in, because the more hitters that I work with, right, and I find it fascinating because hitters are smarter than they've ever been, right? You have guys that have access to TikTok, Instagram accounts, Twitter accounts that'll give you, you know, a billion different ideas and drills about things you should be doing, and in a convincing way that you're definitely going to think it's going to work. But I have a lot of kids that I've worked with that are active on social media and very intelligent about hitting, more intelligent than I was at 18. And I think I could say for certain that when I walked into a college campus, I was pretty smart, understanding of the swing. But these kids nowadays, they know everything. They can see everything. And how do you balance the ability to, because a lot of those Instagram videos are 30-second clips in that need 30 minutes of description, right? So like this guy puts together a nice hot take on a 30-second clip. You know, it looks good, it sounds good, it's convincing, but like, you know, just because, let's just use a random player who might work with a certain hitting coach who's very popular, Aaron Judge, right? If you watch a 30-second clip of somebody telling you Aaron Judge does a certain thing, you'd be convinced that that's what you should be doing, but you need 30 minutes of explanation to truly understand what goes on. And as I've worked with more hitters, I've almost simplified the game so much more. Is that something that you would kind of agree with over the years, of where everything becomes more and more complex? There's kind of simple core parts of the swing that most people that hit well do well, and you know, it doesn't matter how you coil or how you do this or how you do that, that like there's really a certain, like, good hitters do this x things well, and if you can do that, you're gonna have a lot of success for a pretty long time. Kind of talk on that, if you've simplified it, or if maybe you have still a complex view of it.
Yeah, I think that I have a complex view of it personally, but I think that I've simplified it for our players,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that much like you want to. I almost want to be a little bit of drinking from the fire hydrant when I'm taking in for information, and then I want to be able to filter out, because the broader that I can get with this, the more information that I can bring in, I think is only going to help our players. It's up for me to be the filter, and then when I filter things to them, it's up to them to be the filter. Because maybe what I'm telling them isn't what they need to hear, but maybe a piece of it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so I've tried to definitely simplify things when I'm giving them information. You know, the judge thing is crazy, because I do think that there's some things that, like, he teaches that are good, and I think that there's some things that Aaron Judge does that are. I mean, Aaron Judge is great. I'm not knocking Aaron Judge. I think he's a phenomenal baseball player, phenomenal big league hitter. Um, I don't have anybody in our lineup that's 6'7", runs like him, and weighs that much. You know, so like, if I was going to tell everybody they needed to swing like that, I don't think that we would have much success. I think guys need to have individuality, in their swing and their movement profile. You know, the simplest thing that I've done with our guys is, I'm a big believer in hitters hit. If I give a good hitter a heavy bat, within 2-3 swings, he's gonna be able to be on the barrel. If I give him a short bat, same thing. If I gave him a rope bat, a PVC pipe, if I threw bateas at him, if he hit plyo balls, like, hitters hit. So being able to, and I think that then that also promotes adjustability, right? Which, if you can be adjustable, now all of a sudden you're going to have more ability to hit in game, and have that compete in you. So I think I've done less, like, mechanical talks with guys. I'm not too mechanical. I like more of an external focus, which I think really simplifies things when we're working with hitters, where it's like, you know, something as simple as hit a hard ground ball at the shortstop, even though that's not our desired outcome. By telling somebody to hit a hard ground ball at the shortstop, that can clean up some things, maybe with his lead shoulder, without telling him, like, hey, you need to be down on your front side a little bit more. That's going to give you an optimal launch, and it's going to allow you to drive that ball over the shortstop's head. maybe he just needs to adjust where he's trying to hit the ball, which is, hey, hit a hard ground ball at the shortstop, and all of a sudden that cleans it up.
Yeah, he backspins a double to left center.
Right, and that's what you want. Or like, hey, hit something off the pitcher's kneecaps. There's beauty in simplicity. I really think that there is, but I think you also have to be smart in the simple things that you're saying. I don't think that you want to just like cue salad guys or be diarrhea of the mouth. I think there has to be some purpose behind it. And I think by having a broad focus and taking in as much information, that allows you to then filter things down. And that comes back to that gray area kind of we talked about a little bit before with the analytics side. It's like take in as much as you can so you can filter the appropriate information to your players. But those are some things that I really believe in, more of an external focus than an internal, where it's like a guy's in the box and he's thinking what he needs to do with his hands, or do you do with this, or did I get my foot down, or what, it's like, well, you're okay. It's 0-2 now. You're already 0-2. Like you're in an 0-0 count and you're 0-2 because you're mind blown.
I know we're getting a little long here, but I just want to ask. I have one last question. I just want to know, who was your favorite player you've coached at Goldey, and why was it Trevor Powers?
Trevor. I wish Trevor never got mono. I would have more time with him.
Don't we all? I wish COVID never happened.
I know. I have a lot of favorites, but Trevor definitely had an impact on me. I don't know if he had more of an impact on me as a player or as a coach here. Yeah. But it was just like that really helped. I mean, that mellowed me out. We've had a lot. It's like, and it depends on what you think is like what makes somebody your favorite. But just like watching how some guys attack their work, and that like a couple guys we have now, guys that success leaves clues. It's like it's no surprise. Like with this, how you guys have attacked this, because like I watched Trevor attack things as a player, and how he went so focused with stuff, or like, you guys have been around the game, so it's like just guys you see, like, I always tell our young guys, follow Kyle Walker, follow DJ, follow BK, follow those guys, and watch how they work. Like just follow them around for a day and see what they do. Follow Garrett Musey around. And watch how much he cares about hitting, and watch what he does. Success leaves clues.
Did you say that Trevor mellowed you out coaching with him because you realize that you can't be really mad when you look over and your assistant hitting coach has his pants rolled up above his knees scaling the fence to fix the GoPro?
It's hard when a guy's willing to pull all those kinds of stops for the program. You can't be mad. I just think that I think it was just a different outlook on life. And I think that that's really helped me when, I was talking to somebody at my other job about that the other day. It's not so much about not getting too high or too low. It's about those, if you look like an EKG is like a great thing. Like it's a quick spike and then it's back. Like you have that line that goes straight through. Like if you can be on that line more times than not, and kind of limit those instead of like having the big waves and just having a quick jump. Hey, get excited in the excited parts, but then get back to here. You could get a little bit frustrated, but get yourself back to center. In baseball, no doubt. In life, 100%. I think that the more that you can live like that, I think helps you. I think it helps you as a coach too. It's just more perspective. And that's something that Trevor and Bill have really helped. I mean, I know that we've had a ton of success at Goldey offensively. And you guys always give me a lot of credit, and I appreciate that. But it's like where it took off was like when we had an assistant hitting coach, because I can't do it all myself. When even before you were there, like our assistant hitting coaches were our players, because they do have so much say in what we do, and they have so much autonomy. And I think that's important, and I think going forward, that's going to be huge for us. And how I coach and how I go about it is just, we're an offensive unit, and I'm just a small piece of it. It's about those guys, and it's about us and formulating a plan best suits our personnel that year going forward, and our assistant hitting coaches and everybody that plays a role in it, versus like, hey, here's what I believe in. This is what we're going to do. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to beat our heads against the wall until we have it down. And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know how much enjoyment I would find in that. That's just not who I am, and I know our guys wouldn't like playing for that. So,
Yeah, it's you mentioned that it's ironic because it's funny to look back at that year as a player itself, and saying that, wish we didn't have mono, or Dan saying I wish we didn't have COVID. And it's funny how I look back on that perspective, and it actually, was like the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, quite frankly, it's like, just perspective wise, it helped with that transition to coaching, of like realizing that, like, I know for a fact people that I played with at Marywood do not view me the same way that people that I played with at Goldey. I have that on like record. Like, there is, like, I'm sure there's people that are like when they found out I was coaching, they're like, that guy is a douchebag probably to play for, like, a no doubt about it. But the struggles and the adversity were the best thing that ever happened, even though it wasn't exactly how you draw it up when you envision, hitting the transfer portal and going up a level and doing all that stuff. But, I think it was the right time and place. And when COVID hit, I was ready to be done playing baseball. I was ready to be done playing baseball, to say the least. But Dan, any closing thoughts before we let Trate get out of here? I know he's got a wife and kids that want to spend his Saturday with him.
No, it's a pleasure as always, and I'll see you next week. I can't wait.
yeah, man, happy to have you guys home. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. You got any closing thoughts for our listeners out there? Any wisdom? I mean, you brought so much in this hour. I feel like we did it in episode 1, and then Dan and I hung up and talked, and we're like, God, we didn't even go in. Now we did it in episode 2, and I'm sitting here thinking we didn't even go in. Like, it's just we might have to get long-winded with a 5-hour guy or something. Like, pull a Jocko or a Joe Rogan here and just like set up shop and get a day
down and carry. I would say, like, it depends on what the listener base is, but if you're a player or coach, I just think that take in as much information as you can from as many different avenues as you can. I think that that's helped me. Even if you were an hour and 7 minutes into this now, if you've listened to the pod, and you take one thing away from what I said, and you can put your own spin on it, then I think that it was worth it. Define what success looks like. I listen to a bunch of people and talk to a bunch of people to try to learn any little thing, whether it's something that we already do that maybe I could clean up, or something I haven't even thought of that maybe would help our players. So there's just so much information out there. It's your job to take as much in and then filter it. That would be the best advice I have right now. And then also, if you're not subscribing to the pod, you need to. So what are you doing?
I appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate that one. And that is so important, right? Being open-minded, not acting like you know it all, know everything, and being able to learn is something that everybody in baseball and in life should be able to take out of this conversation and be able to go from that and keep that open mind. So definitely appreciate that. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in, as that will conclude our episode for today. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast on all podcast platforms, including Apple Pods, Spotify, and anywhere you find your podcast, including YouTube. Post episodes every Monday. Holiday schedule is going to ramp up here, but we're going to get this one out on Monday, and then we're hoping to have something starting in the new year to get some consistency on those Mondays. They're always hitting your feed at 7 a.m. sharp. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at BacksideGB, Instagram at Backside Groundballs, and TikTok at Backside Groundball. And most importantly, make sure you're sharing with 5 friends, and we'll see you next time on the Backside Groundballs podcast.